LinkedIn Echo Chamber. This is ML's Like Team Spirit. Today we have Craig Snodgrass. Craig, how are you doing?
Doing wonderful. Starting off 2024 with a bang.
Excellent. Craig, we're happy to have you. Where are you dialing in from, please?
So I'm in Richmond, Virginia in the United States.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. We're happy to have international guests. So, Craig, I'd hit you up to join us and talk about your life in data. What was interesting straight away when you came up with a bit of feedback was that actually you didn't really start as a data guy. So, what I'd love for you to do is perhaps start by spending 60 seconds your life story, in fact. So from when you started work until today, take us through everything that you've done, and then I'd like to deep dive into the first part of your career and pick at what data science did you see, what were you doing, and some of the insights from that time. So have a go at the 60-second flavor first, please.
Absolutely. So I am a chemical engineer. I graduated, went to go work in a manufacturing environment in a chemical plant, which is what chemical engineers did. And I spent 5 years there. Absolutely loved it. This is where I fell in love with the data piece. I'll get into that in a little bit. Switched industries and moved to financial services, went to Capital One. Found out Capital One was somebody who was doing more of what it is I wanted to go do, but doing it at absolute scale. And did that for 10 years, switched industries again, moved into advertising for 12 years, was able to build upon what I got to do at Capital One. And then right now I've switched industries completely and I'm into wildfire resilience and, how can you use data and all of that to go help defend houses from, wildfire threats. So 4 distinct industries in my career, but this thread of data and using data to actually tip the scales in your favor has been consistent throughout that tenure.
Good, Craig. Exactly 60 seconds. You're my only guest that has achieved that first objective. So thank you for that.
I have one of those chess clocks where I can sit there and I can hit it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, so being an engineer or starting there meant you must have been exposed to data to some extent. Can you take us through that first role? So what I'm really interested in getting out here is, what were you doing there? Before we started this segment, I'm going to have to steal your thunder. You said there was an aha moment. So I'd love for you to kind of tell the story. What happened when you were an engineer that then created an inflection for you and sort of dragged you towards data and data sciences?
Yep. So a chemical engineer in a large chemical plant, tons of moving equipment. And as you can imagine, moving equipment fails. And when moving equipment fails, it's bad. Plant has to slow down, cut capacity, and all of that. So that we had a reliability engineer who went out and bought some vibration analysis equipment. Basically, you could go up to the moving equipment and you could measure it, and you could kind of start to see that it was getting more wobbly. And the more wobbly it got meant that the failure was imminent. And, he actually had times where you could see the equipment had failed and you could go look at his data and you could see that it was climbing up and it was going to reach failure. And I was like, great, let's go put one of these on every single moving equipment in the plant. He's like, we can't. I'm like, okay, well then let's go around and measure it every single day with this portable thing. He goes, I can't get through them all in a day. He goes, I can maybe get through them all in a couple weeks. So I was like, well, then what do we do? And he's like, I need to go do something that tells me where I should be measuring and where I don't need to measure. And that was where I first learned this concept, and I'll call it sloping. So say you have 1,000 pieces of equipment inside the plant and you're just randomly going around and go do it. So that's a flat line. But if you knew these 200 should have there's the more higher chance of failure for these 200 versus the other 200, right? Like then you're sloping where it is you're spending your time, you're optimizing. So he didn't have infinite resources. He has a finite resource. He had one person who could go around with this piece of equipment, and he was trying to figure out which ones should get more attention than others. And so basically he started to use data to go build out models about all this different equipment, had all these input variables, and was using it based on some of the data from the vibration analysis to say, hey, these should get more and these should get less because I only have so many limited resources. So then so instead of the line being like this, it was now sloped, and you're basically, again, you're tilting the odds in your favor of knowing what it is to go do. And when I went back and looked at it and figured out what he was doing, he was at an individual level building a model. That's what machine learning is, like you're building a model at an individual level to go predict an outcome. So rather than everybody's outcome being 50% likelihood of failure in the next 2 weeks, he was able to say, hey, these are 70% and these are 30%. So just that concept of using data, again, and you have a known outcome. The outcome that you want to avoid is failure. The outcome that you want to have is that it continues to go work. And you have something out there that is predicting what's going to happen so that you can invest your resources accordingly. When I looked at that, I just, it makes sense now. Like this was, mid 90s. So it's been out there for a while and most everybody knows about it. But like seeing that real world view inside an operations, I was like, this is fantastic. And when I started digging at it a little bit, I was like, oh, this can be used in several different places. And Six Sigma came around and you started training us all up on statistical tools, which basically was doing regression, which is machine learning. And I just started applying it over and over in manufacturing. And that's when I made the jump to financial services. Capital One, it was called IBS, information based strategy. Basically, they were just using data to go build models to go, again, tilt things in their favor from what it is they were going to go do. I wanted to be surrounded by that at scale. So my aha moment was this, I don't know if I ever told this reliability engineer that he had this aha moment for me, but like seeing it in real world and what somebody was doing, absolutely fantastic. And then I've kind of just built upon that moving forward.
Craig, here's how it is. When we post this video, you can tag him in if you know his name, and we'll have this as a tribute to that aha moment and that this guy had done that for you. I suppose this guy probably has a different, if he's still working, has a different life now, where I suppose the machines in a factory are creating data continuously now.
Yes,
and I suppose
it is.
Might do a video
right.
on this another day, and I don't know who to hook into it, but I think in manufacturing there's this concept of a digital twin now, where a network of machines that creates data continuously is now modeled in a big simulation and overcomes that resource constraint that he had, where he had to like limit what machines he looked at and when. That's reached a whole another level now.
Yeah, it's so far the GE now, when they sell their aircraft engines, they actually lease it. They have all this data that they use. They can tell when it's time to go through and refurbish it and all that. They take care of all that because of the data scientists who model all that out. Yeah, so the digital twin's a great analogy.
And actually, Craig, you just remind me, after we finish this, I think I'm going to send off a proposal to Boeing and see if they need any analysts to kind of, check any of the vibrations on the doors or something. I think that would be
maybe let that one simmer down. Maybe let that one simmer down just a little bit first before you send it out.
Yeah. Well, look, you've moved on to financial services then, and seen probably, I know a little bit about Capital One. I was never working for them, but I remember a long time ago, someone who had worked for them. I know my accent fools everybody. I'm from the UK, and someone was telling me about Wilmington, Delaware, being this credit hub of America, and I think all the big companies were based there. Is this where Cap One were based?
It was close to it. I think at some point, Delaware is the actual where you form your corporation, but where the actual people sat was in Virginia, just right next to Delaware. And what I found out there was, like, obviously it's a non-manufacturing environment, but they were using machine learning to go understand who would respond to what type of mailing, like what type of creative that you're sending out. And then more importantly is, who should they be mailing? So back to this, back to my example from the plant, like you only had one piece of equipment to go around and go do the vibration analysis. Well, you don't have an infinite amount of dollars to go do marketing. Right. If you did, then you wouldn't need any smartness at all. Right. You would just you hit everybody every single day for what it is you need to go do. Right. And what Capital One was doing was just constantly looking at all the different streams of data that's out there, building models, again, doing this. Who should I send something to? Who should I not send something to? Are they going to respond? Are they not going to respond? And then from a credit risk standpoint, right? Like, what credit limit should I give them? Like, are they low risk? Are they high risk? So again, if you think about a straight line, everybody gets a $500 credit limit, but the reality is some people should get more, some people should get less, right? And the models would go through and do that. And I think the biggest thing that I learned, there's two big things that I learned at Capital One, seeing how that works at scale. Right. If back in the day, the way people made these decisions, it was all manual. Like it's called underwriting, right? Like someone would manually look at you, interview you, and go do that. But you can't do that at scale. like the actual, computer machinery and how that was all set up to go get that done, how statisticians sat there and looked at their models, confirmed they were correct, make sure that they didn't decay over time. Like, it was incredible to go see that. And it was also incredible to see there was just a culture of that. So it wasn't just, hey, how do we go use data to go make these types of decisions? How do we use data in our other parts of the business? Even so much so, I talked to somebody recently, and they were telling me about this gravity modeling they were doing. Where do we go build new bank branches? Like, all of that, you go look at, where people live, where people travel. Again, the key with machine learning is you have a known outcome that you want to have happen. You have a known outcome that you want to go avoid. And like, once you kind of have that and you go understand it, you go through and you figure out what data can you have to go make these decisions. So again, they weren't just making marketing decisions off of it. They weren't just making credit decisions. They were making operations decisions off of it, right? And, who do we hire? How are people performing? All of that was kind of built into that culture. So when I think of machine learning, I think of all of that. It isn't just the act of machine learning. It isn't just having smart people come up and try to get good answers so that you can have this slope again, so that you can tilt the scales in your favor. It's having a culture that wants to go do that. It's being able to identify, this is a good problem to go use data for, versus something that, maybe a different tool set, skill set is required. And being surrounded by that for years, just, you forget, once I left it, you realize that you're now surrounded by people who don't do that. And that, that was like the reverse aha moment. It was like, oh, not everybody does that, because you were surrounded by people who did it all the time.
Yeah, I felt similar. Leaving an insurance company, I left it. After my first job for 10 years was because it was a big corporate. So sometimes nothing much happens, but an insurance company is interesting. Audience, if ever you're looking for a job where you learn about analytics, a company that manufactures something and it doesn't know the cost of what it takes to manufacture the product that they
Right.
sell, it's naturally very analytical. So yeah, FS is a good place to learn. Hey Craig, got good news and bad news for you. The good news is I'm loving your story. The bad news is we're hitting time.
Oh,
You're gonna have to come. You're gonna have to come back.
I can do
So
it.
yeah. So I heard that you then jumped out into advertising and other roles. What we'd
That's
like to
right.
do is
Advertising and wildfire. Yep. We can continue the thread. We can continue the thread there.
we're going to bring you back. Craig, thank you for the support. Everyone, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, John Con.